Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform goes global, and it does so during the Global Goals Week at the Dubai Expo. In this session, we will speak about circular opportunities in buildings and the infrastructure. My name is Freek van Eyck. I'm the Director of Holland Circular Hotspot and co-chair of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. I'm extremely pleased that we're here in the Dutch Pavilion because it's extremely inspiring. And it symbolizes the nexus, where water, food, and energy all come together in an integrated way, and that fits so well with our topic of today, circular buildings and infrastructure. Who's with us today on our side? We have here a full house at the Dutch Pavilion, and at the same time we have approximately 200 persons online with us. So for those in the room, please switch off your telephones, the mics, and make yourself acquainted with the emergency exits in the unlikely event that there might be an incident. So what's this session about? In this session, we present 1 year of work at the European Circular Economy Stakeholders Platform Leadership Group on buildings and infrastructure. With more than 15 organizations from all over Europe, we have been working together on a number of topics. And specifically, we did a deep dive in 3 topics. And you will see more about that today. Now, I don't want to be Dr. Doom, or not too much at least, but we really have a challenge here. We need to get on track with buildings and infrastructure. It's an essential sector, but at the same time, it accounts for 50% of all resource use, 30% of greenhouse gas emissions in Europe. I can only say we have to go to action, and we have to go to action very fast. So we have a great lineup of all speakers representing the business side, the policy side, the international side, the knowledge side, the local point of reference, and in less than 15 minutes from now, we will have something unique, the global launch of a new brochure on circular infrastructure. So stay tuned. But now it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce our first speaker of today. And for that, we travel virtually to Belgium. We go to Josefina Lindblom, Public Officer, Sustainable Buildings at DG Environment. Are you there, Josefina?
I am indeed.
Great to have you with us. We would like to hear more from you about the EU perspective on and the need to scale up and innovate in buildings and infrastructure. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk here today. It is about a topic which is indeed very important, where the European Commission is moving ahead with several proposals and policies, and I'd like to say something about that here. Circularity and life cycle thinking is extremely important when it comes specifically to the building sector. And why is that then? Well, if we look at the full life cycle, we have 50% of all our extracted materials being used for construction, which we just heard you saying, right? But also, if we look at the full life cycle, in fact, half of our total energy consumption is linked to buildings. And of course, more than 1/3 of our total generated waste is construction and demolition waste. So you can just imagine the resource use which is linked to the construction sector. Up to now, the focus of the EU as well as national building policy has been very much focused on the energy performance of the building during its use phase. So for heating and cooling, etc. That is very important, and we need to continue to do so. But in order to actually decarbonize our building stock, we need to look at the full life cycle. So this means that we should also consider what happens before and after we use our buildings. For example, there are lots of carbon emissions from the extraction of materials and the manufacturing of construction products. This is where circularity and life cycle thinking comes into play and becomes very important for the decarbonization of our building stock. What we actually see today is an increasing amount of the total carbon emissions over the full life cycle of building, the so-called whole life carbon. But what if we, in order to make our buildings more energy efficient, use a lot of materials, but in an inefficient way, which comes at a high carbon cost. And on top of that, at the very beginning of the life cycle, of course, when we are constructing our buildings, before no occupant has even entered the building. What if that's the case? What if that material-related carbon is of such quantity that you would have to use the building very energy efficiently for 20, 30, or even 40 years before that initial carbon cost is paid off. What if we are renovating our buildings to become more energy efficient, but we do that in such a way that the insulation cannot be separated from the concrete or whatever material we are using at the end of life of that once renovated building, so that that material then ends up on landfill as opposed to being able to be recycled. This is to a large extent the current situation in most parts of Europe. We thus need modern policy which acknowledges and makes use of circularity and life cycle thinking next to energy efficiency to reach our climate targets. This will help us reaching our targets in a much more cost-efficient way. For the last couple of years, the European Commission has been developing a common language to assess and report on the sustainability performance of buildings, and we call this framework levels. Among the different areas that this tool covers, it of course also includes this notion of whole life carbon. It moreover uses a number of indicators which help a beginner in this area to track or to get on track to assess and report on carbon emissions over the full life cycle. So during 2021, we have started to use this tool, levels, as a basis for circularity and life cycle thinking in different kinds of policy initiatives. And there are three key ones which I would like to mention here. The Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. This is the really the key piece of legislation for building performance in the EU. And the recent proposal for its revision now includes the requirement to assess and report on whole life carbon as well for new buildings. So it does take circularity into account when setting out legislation for our decarbonized building stock for the future. And then we have another policy initiative, which is called Sustainable Finance. It targets specifically private investments, and it sets out criteria that needs to be fulfilled to define the investment as sustainable with everything that comes with that then. Again, the requirement is there to assess and report on the whole life carbon for new buildings. And the third one, the last one I wanted to mention, is a different kind of policy initiative. It's, you may have heard of this, it's called the New European Bauhaus. It links sustainability, aesthetics, and social inclusion, and circularity plays a very important role here for us. Now, circularity and life cycle thinking is not just important when it comes to carbon emissions and climate change mitigation. If we use our materials and indeed our buildings in a more efficient way, we will see a lot of benefits. And I really look forward to the discussion today, to the conversations and the presentations, to learn about how the different participants here work with circularity, what their solutions are, and how they are considering this and how they assess these benefits. So thank you very much for having me here today.
And thank you so much, Josefina. I think you have explained what's going on in Europe, in every part of the value chain, basically, in such a clear and precise way. I think that's extremely helpful. Now we know what's happening in Europe. We'd like to see what's happening at the national level. And for that, we turn basically to the host of this pavilion, to the Netherlands. And with us, we have Roald Lapeyre, Vice Minister for the Environment from the Netherlands Ministry for Infrastructure and Water Management. And we'll make a connection to Gouda, his hometown. Roald, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. Good morning to everyone, both in Dubai as well as online.
So, Roald, can you tell us from a national perspective about the need to scale up and innovate in buildings and infrastructure?
Yes, I'm very happy to do so, Freek. And again, a very good morning. It's my pleasure to be with you. Of course, it's a great pity I can't be there in person. I would have loved to come your way, but unfortunately, the COVID situation withholds me from doing that. But nevertheless, it is great to be with you. And I would like to emphasize that the need for international platforms like this one is, I think, essential in reaching the goals we have when it comes to circular economy in the built environment. The European circular economy stakeholder platform, I think, has made the right choice to choose this theme, to choose the topic of building and infrastructure as its theme for today and this week. And this is, of course, because the building environment, the building and infrastructure construction sectors have huge impact. It is responsible for about 50% of all raw material use, 40% of energy use, and 30% of water use. In addition to this, actually, the construction and demolition of the building environment in the Netherlands is responsible for about 1/3 of all CO2 emissions, and I think that is the case around the world as well. So it is a huge carbon emitter, and that is, I think, another reason to be very active and ambitious when it comes to circularity in this sector. Of course, governmental interventions in the built environment are important. Traditionally, they've been focused on energy efficiency of buildings with, of course, gradually rising legal performance requirements. But nowadays, we should add circularity to those requirements. As a government, we're working on this, of course. We are, for an example, considering mandatory requirements for the use of material passports, and we are also considering a quantitative target when it comes to the reduction, not just of CO2 emissions, but also of circularity in a broader sense for the built environment as well. But of course, government regulations are not enough. We need more, and there is more, of course. Innovations within the value chain are extremely important, and innovations are there and are being worked on in the Netherlands and around the world. Innovations in better waste collection, in sorting and recycling, as well as innovations in circular design of business models, products, and materials. And that is also why the Dutch government has taken the initiative to sign a voluntary agreement with the building and construction sectors to reach ambitious and specific targets. We call this our National Concrete Agreement. Concrete has a nice double meaning here, of course, with several main targets. 30% of CO2 reduction in that particular sector in 2030, and a 100% high quality recycling of all demolished concrete in that same year 2030, which is only 8 years away, of course. In addition to this, we believe that the government should also lead by example when it comes to government procurement. So right now we're procuring circular bicycle roads, but also we have already seen the first circular viaduct being built in the Netherlands. We are impressed and encouraged by the dynamic in the building and construction sector, and we are very happy to see that Dutch architects show with the Dutch Pavilion at the Dubai Expo what can be done if we look differently at the materials we use, differently at the products we make, and differently at the business concepts we use to become circular and climate neutral in the way we build, we construct, and take apart the end at the life cycle. So those of you that are in Dubai can see this in person, and those around the world, I would like to advise to take a look through the internet, because it's not only beautiful, but it's circular as well. It is impressive how innovators such as Dutch startup companies, think of Smart Liberator, Polystyrene Loop, and many others have come up with innovative solutions to improve sorting and recycling of construction materials from demolition. Furthermore, I believe it's very impressive and promising to see that companies have taken the initiative to launch a voluntary EPR, a voluntary extended producer responsibility scheme on facade elements of buildings. And what do you think of the rapid development of circular by design solutions? I think this is very important as well, such as prefab and modular systems in the construction sector. Is that the fundamental game changer of the sector? I certainly presume it is. I hope it is. and that innovations like those will help improve not just quality, but also provide lower cost and CO2 emissions, of course. These creative initiatives and solutions will not come by themselves. That is pretty obvious. They need an enabling environment. They need exchanges across Europe and within platforms such as the ECESP, in which companies and governments work together in public-private networks, cross-border and along the value chain. We are committed as a Netherlands government to be a very active partner in this, and I hope you will have a very fruitful dialogue with each other today and in this week. Inspire each other, listen to each other, raise critical questions, and I would say worldwide, the sector, I'm sure, is able to become circular and climate neutral, but only if we trust each other, if we work together, if we all have the courage to invest in innovations, and of course, if we push each other by all we have to the next level. So thank you very much for your attention. And I would like now to hand over the microphone virtually to Vincent Gruis, Professor Vincent Gruis, also with us virtually. And he's the chair of the so-called Circular Construction Economy Transition Team in the Netherlands. And I think we're jointly going to launch something very interesting and educating. Professor Gruis, the word and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and hello everyone. And indeed, we have something very interesting to share with you, and that is this very new report about the circular infrastructure with the very apt subtitle, The Road Towards a Sustainable Future. And as a chair of the Dutch transition team for circular construction economy, it is my pleasure that and also my honor actually, to be invited today to virtually hand this publication over to our very distinguished panel, and also to present later on some of the highlights. The report, it not only emphasizes the challenges which have already been introduced in a way by Josefina, but interestingly, it also shows that some things are already possible, mainly based on best practices from the Netherlands, but it shows that it's really possible to create infrastructure which does not harm the environment and still helps our economy. And also it makes a very convincing plea for more international cooperation, and which is why I'm very happy to present the results and the ideas today. So I don't know how to do this through stream, but here it comes, the new publication.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much.
Professor Gruis.
There it is.
We will turn to the technical team. We would like to have a sneak preview reaction from all the future panelists. And the first one to give a reaction will actually be Roald Lapère. Can you share your emotions? What does this mean for you, Roald?
There it is, and thank you very much, Professor Gruis. I think it is impressive in several ways, because I think you indeed need to be inspired by examples that show it can be done, and this is exactly what this does. It shows that it can be done, and I had the sneak preview when I got the brochure, and I was, for an example, very impressed. Look at it on page 25, a circular viaduct. I mentioned it very briefly right now. Normally, a viaduct would last maybe 40 years. This is a circular viaduct made of concrete building blocks, basically Lego blocks from concrete, that can be reused twice, 3 times, 4 times maybe. So that makes the lifespan of that viaduct not just 40 years, but 120, 160 years. And that is the way I think we can deal also with the challenges in the building environment and infrastructure. So it's an inspiring document, and I hope you will all read it.
Thank you very much. We move over to Josefina from a first reaction from a European perspective. Also a short reaction, please.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot. I mean, I can only just agree very much with Roald. It's very inspiring. I've also had the chance to have a look at it in advance. I think what struck me the most was perhaps coming from the policy field then, is how you set out very clear targets where we need to be by 2030, 2050, etc. And that's very much how we are working as well. I'm also very interested in how you made quite a lot of work on how to actually measure circularity, because it's easy to talk about it, but if we want to spread this out more generally in the sector, among all kinds of companies, not just the very most innovative ones, then we need to understand how do we go about in that sort of mainstream sector as well, and how we measure and assess this. So lots of interesting stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Josefina. Now we move back to the Netherlands and to a quick business reaction. We go to Ingrid Thijssen, and she's one of the most influential business persons in the Netherlands, actually, because she heads the Confederation of Netherlands Industry and Employers. Ingrid, what's your impression of this brochure? First 30-second, 1-minute reaction, please.
Yes, well, I'm very delighted to be here in the Dutch Pavilion, although it's online, and I'm very happy with this brochure. I also had the pleasure of having a sneak preview, and I was really proud of Dutch businesses when I read it this weekend. And well, Roald had my text. I also had especially an interest on the circular viaduct, which is really an impressive story, and I think very inspiring. But my first reaction, it's such a absolutely important subject to get also the building, the environment circular, and I'm so proud of Dutch businesses with their innovative solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid. Much appreciated. We move back to the studio here in the Dutch Pavilion, and I go to Giancarlo Mangone. You're the head of strategic master planning of ADNOC, and you represent the region. So what was your impression when you saw the brochure?
Is this okay? All right. No, it's fantastic. It's great to see the innovation, and we've already been talking about a number of things in Abu Dhabi with the Dutch Embassy about some of these initiatives. The first thing I'd say is, while it has mostly a building scale, the great thing is at the end, the talk about international partnership and collaboration, and UAE has, it's quite different in the sense that it's aspirational in its development, and there's that potential to create regional planning and looking at circular economy from a regional scale. And that's something that I think is missing in some of the existing circular economy strategy is the Dutch are great at the building scale and really making everything efficient as possible, but now we also need to look at the larger scale, because the biggest savings and effectiveness is actually at the pre-design stage, and really when we look at region and global scales. So I think bringing those two together, there's a lot of opportunity in UAE due to its aspirations.
We'll bring that with us to the panel. Thank you very much. Also with us is Christine Lemaitre from the Dutch Sustainable Building Council. What went through you when you saw this brochure?
I would say finally. And as always, you know, the Netherlands are ahead when it's about circularity. And when we talk about, you know, circularity and climate protection, we never talk about infrastructure. But in Germany, it's almost 50% of what we build is infrastructure. And when we talk about just transition, this is so crucial that we build the right infrastructure, that we build sustainable infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't grow. You know, we build it, we design it, and we have to design it in a completely different way. So I'm very impressed, and I think this is something we really have to as well show internationally, to raise awareness, especially in regions like this, where there's a lot of construction going on in infrastructure, to do it right from the beginning. Otherwise, you know, we're just following up with the same mistakes we made in other parts of the world.
Wonderful. So I think your words already make the initiative takers very happy. Infrastructure should deserve more attention. But yeah, then again, we talk about this brochure, but you're wondering, what the heck is in this brochure? So we go back to Professor Gruijs, and we ask him actually to guide us through the brochure in, let's say, a short time, please.
Thank you, Freek. Yes, of course, just the highlights. Maybe something a little bit about myself first, though. I'm professor of housing management at the Delft University of Technology, and that means that personally I focus mainly on housing, how to make our housing stock more circular. But as already have been said by the panel members as well, there's a lot more real estate, there's a lot more building works, And infrastructure is equally important if we want to make the transition to sustainable economies. And actually, in the transition team for circular construction economy in the Netherlands, we look holistically at the whole construction sector. So we look at houses, we look at offices, but we also look at infrastructures, bridges, tunnels, etc. And we actually think that is of key importance to look at the whole construction industry in a holistic way, because many of the principles that can be applied for one type of buildings can also be applied to other types of construction works. Of course, today, because the topic of the brochure focuses on infrastructure, I will mainly talk about infrastructure today. And that's also very important, as we can see on the next slide. It is actually, in a way, also an important backbone of our economy. Of course, infrastructure enables us to basically have an economy. It
Can we have the
enables
slides up,
trade.
please?
Yeah, can we do the next slide?
Yeah, continue talking. The slides will follow,
Yeah,
Vincent.
okay, fine, great. So it enables that we have an economy. It literally enables the transport of goods and services. And if you sometimes want to help communities or regions that are struggling a bit, then infrastructure can be an important means to actually help them in generating a better economy and society. And for a country like the Netherlands, I live close to the sea, literally in The Hague. So I'm very happy that there's some infrastructure that actually also literally protects us. So very important, but yeah, unfortunately, infrastructure is also currently responsible for a lot of environmental burdens. If we go to the next slide, for example, some percentages have already been mentioned by other speakers, but it consumes, estimates vary, but 40 to 60% of the world materials. And here we're talking about the construction sector as a whole. It's also responsible for a very large part of the emissions, the greenhouse emissions. And it's not on this slide here, but we also generate a lot of waste with our construction activities. And infrastructure, being such a large chunk of those construction activities, is thus also responsible for a large part of these environmental burdens. And if you look at all the plans that are made for good reasons, for generating new infrastructure, but also for replacing and maintaining the infrastructure that's already there, we are potentially looking at even more environmental burdens. So this makes it very important to treat it in a more sustainable way, and circularity is an important means for that. And that is also why in the Netherlands we have the ambition to create a fully circular economy by 2050, with already reducing the use of raw materials by 50% in 2030. Now, this is not something that happens by itself. So we have set up 5 so-called transition agendas with also transition teams. Transition teams are people from government, industry, knowledge institutes working together to generate good policies and to set up good initiatives to enable this transition. We focus on, for example, plastics. We focus on the industry for materials. We focus on consumer goods, and one of these 5 agendas is also the construction industry, because it is very important to create a sustainable economy. In the transition team for circular construction industry, we use the analogy of a mountain climbing expedition to actually express and think about the challenge of how to create a circular construction economy. Of course, first of all, because it shows that it is not easy, it's really hard work. But also, we think that in able to have a successful mountain climbing expedition, you first need to establish a good base camp. A base camp from which you can start climbing the mountain. That's why we have the short-term ambition to, in 2023, establish all the, let's say, the conditions, so good policies, but also good frameworks, good tools, etc., to enable our construction industry to make this transition and to literally climb that mountain. That doesn't mean that up till 2023 we do nothing, that we only think and talk. No, actually we are experimenting a lot and trying to learn as much as possible from these experiments to actually practice and be ready for climbing that mountain. So the brochure actually already gives a nice overview from best practices in the infrastructure. And the circular viaduct has already been mentioned, but you also have to think about, for example, circular road furniture, in which we experiment with, for example, bio-based or reclaimed materials. We also established a national bridge bank, so we know which bridges become available, for example, because they have to be replaced. But then people can look at the materials that are in those bridges and see if and how they can be reclaimed and reused. But we also work on, for example, procurement instruments such as DuboCall, which is a very holistic instrument to assess the environmental effects of infrastructure activities. And we support other cooperation networks, including, for example, CB23, which is a really wide network of professionals working in the construction industry. And together they create tools and guidelines and procurement approaches which can be used throughout the Dutch construction industry. And this is very important, because we know the time to act is now. Of course, from the environmental challenge, but also from the fact that throughout not only in Europe, but all across the globe, a lot of plans are being made for new infrastructure. And for the first time, maybe since with the COVID pandemic, we have experienced what it is to have scarcity, because sometimes the supply chains weren't able to deliver or not deliver at the time we preferred. And this is, of course, if we cross our planetary boundaries, this is something we'll see more and more in the future. So maybe as the forelast slide shows, the brochure also makes a plea for international cooperation. We think this is crucial. It's crucial, of course, to exchange knowledge, to learn from each other, but it goes further than that. I think we also need harmonization of protocols, norms, and standards. The industry is actually literally asking us also as policymakers to develop those, to create clarity, level playing fields, etc. And we need to, of course, use each other's materials and keep using them as good as possible, also internationally. So in conclusion, the last slide, we believe circular infrastructure is the road towards a sustainable future, and we invite all of you to join us on that road. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vincent. A warm hand for this initiative. Great work by the Transition Agenda of Circular Construction in the Netherlands. I applaud the initiative from Rijkswaterstaat, supported by TNO and Holland Circular Hotspot, and all the people, all the best practices in it, actually. Unfortunately, time is a little bit running up. I would have loved the question, what's the secret weapon of the Transition Agenda? What makes it successful? But maybe we keep that till the end. I ask you, do you have a question you would like the panelists later on in the program to answer? Short question, please.
Absolutely. We mentioned a lot of themes for international cooperation, which will help the transformation to a circular construction and infrastructure industry. But I'm very curious what the other panel members think are their main topic for international cooperation. So what should we really work on internationally to enable this transition from their perspective?
Thank you, Vincent. Quite clear. Now, this is one brochure down, but another one is to go, because this is a sneak preview for a brochure you will get in March. And that's not a Dutch brochure, that's a European brochure from the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform Leadership Group, with European examples and not with policy recommendations. No, we are Europe, with reflections on policy. March 1 and 2, note it in your agenda, we will launch it. This stakeholder platform worked on buildings and infrastructure. Infrastructure was one topic, but there were more topics. The next topic is about design for deconstruction, and it's my pleasure to invite Christine to the stage to enlighten us. Christine, the floor is yours. Give her a warm hand, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. Yeah, design for deconstruction, I think it has been already mentioned, the building sector, I would say is a very specific sector because it's a very diverse sector. We see a lot of small structures, so we don't have just a few big companies, and once they do the transformation, everyone transforms. So the question is, how can we do that? Maybe a few words about the DGNB, our organization with the German Sustainable Building Council. We're an NGO and we're basically member-based. And as a transformation tool, we decided many years ago, basically 15 years ago when we were founded, to do it via a certification system. Because like I said, the sector is very diverse and everyone is defining their own goals. It will never come together. So we have to have tools, we have to have processes in place where people work towards the same goals and where they as well know what is my key responsibility. Because this is, I would say, one of the fun games as well in the real estate sector. The circle of blame is endlessly big. So it's always the other one's fault why something doesn't happen. And you have so many actors and stakeholders. When it comes to buildings or infrastructure, it is really not possible to find who is really responsible. So this is our transformation tool. We have now more than 1,500 members. We're the largest green building council in Europe and the 5th largest green building council worldwide so far. So we heard about that already today a few times. Climate change, we have to save the world. And I always like to show that picture. First of all, it was a very positive spirit, 2015, but it's been already 7 years ago. 7 years ago, where there's negotiation going on, we are on this high level on this, yeah, someone should move eventually, we have to do something. But I think what many people don't know is that the COP21 was the first climate conference where there was a buildings day. There was a whole day dedicated just to the relevance of the building and infrastructure to reaching these goals. So it is not really new. And there's been a buildings day basically almost every climate conference. 2017 was the first panel we were sitting on with concrete manufacturers talking about their big CO2 emissions. And I think when we talk about circular economy, we feel like there's a big trend at the moment, and for many it's new, and then they think it's new to the world. But if we always start from zero, from a white piece of paper, we're not going to move quickly enough, because this is the reality we're facing today. We see more trends, we see other things coming up, but if we don't have a good design, a holistic approach, and bringing things together in the right way, and I don't know who said it earlier, but to me, circular economy is part of sustainability. This is not a parallel world, it's not either or, and we have to think about things integrated, because it's not enough, like what we see here with the sustainability pavilion, to have net zero energy and net zero water, but if you look at the steel, the amount of steel that has been used to put these PV up in the air, this is not sustainable, this is not holistic, and I think this is something we really have to focus on to do it better. Because I think, and that's a good message, there are things moving in the building sector. When we started 2009 to certify buildings, this was basically the picture. The size of the ring is the carbon footprint of the buildings. On average, we certified. Green are the emissions from the in-use phase, basically the operation of buildings, and gray from the material. Now, almost 10 years later, I don't have the last ring here, but the good buildings coming in for certification, they're already 50-50 over a life cycle of 50 years. So every project we certify has to do a life cycle assessment, so we have all that data. If we talk about net zero energy buildings, so it's basically no CO2 emission in the in-use phase, the only thing we can optimize are basically the materials. And then we're right there where the circular economy basically starts. And this is our approach, is not to come this top-down, because I think we need too much time and we don't have time anymore to do this top-down approach. I mean, what do we do with these big numbers? What does anyone in a project really do with the knowledge that they know like 40% of the CO2 emissions are coming from buildings? So our work is basically bottom-up. And I don't know if you know what you see here. This is a picture of a large deconstruction site in Germany. And this is basically how they separate the metals. So every machine is taking another kind of metal out of this bulk of material and putting it in a container. This is basically the scale we have to deal with. And we always, when we talk about circular economy, it feels like we're like on a white piece of paper, we can rebuild the world with very front-loaded design. But this is our approach, and I really like to urge you all, we have to start where we are today. And I think why we're not moving fast enough, we just saw the Circular Economy Gap report, because we're not following through. The question is, where are the drivers? And the drivers are in logistics. Does a deconstruction company today know how they should disassemble a building that is circular or is designed circular? They have no idea. And so we started to develop that deconstruction certificate. And I had a very interesting conversation with the CEO of a deconstruction company. And, you know, I'm a civil engineer, so you come with these typical things. It's better to screw instead of gluing. And he was looking at me like he didn't get the question. I said, well, isn't it better for you, you know, if the construction is screwed together? And he's like looking at me, he's like, have you ever tried to unscrew a bolt which has been fully loaded for 40 years? And I said, no. And he's like, us neither. And then he showed us the big machinery they basically go on site. And I think this kind of knowledge we have to understand. This is how it works today. We have to see what can we change today, but what kind of knowledge can we transfer for architects into the design process? Because it doesn't help if we have this theoretical idea of what deconstruction would mean, and if the reality is basically this. So we designed this certificate for deconstruction to really provide a tool, especially for municipalities, but as well for developers, to, when they come to a site and they say, okay, we need to renovate, even a renovation is a part of deconstruction, or we completely deconstruct, we have a guideline, we have a tool where we can optimize and measure. And the key part, and I will show that a little bit later as well, is basically to value material. And I think there we have to be very, very cautious about when we talk about circular economy. It's not one fits all. It's different if you talk about the textile industry or consumer goods, or if you talk about buildings. Circular economy in buildings, in my opinion, is not the invitation that we can just demolish after 10, 20 years. The aim is still to value material and that we build buildings with a high quality, which ideally people will use for 100 years. That should be the topic. So what we do here, we emphasize of, do you really need to deconstruct? Can you not value the material? Can you not preserve part of the building? And then reuse as one part, closing the loops. And this was for us a key learning as well from this development process, was that we need to have time to design for deconstruction. This is what basically all the deconstruction companies said. If we have more time, we will find ways what to do with the material, can we reuse it. So I think to as well create a value on this knowledge and on that process of deconstruction is very crucial, because they come today in on a site, has to be done as quickly as possible, as cheap as possible. And then no one's talking about circular economy because there's no time. They really don't have time. So I think this is what we have to understand. The starting point in the future for every design has to be basically in the existing building world. I mean, now here we are in a region where we see a lot of new construction happening on an empty lot, but this will change over time very quickly. We will see that buildings need to be renovated. So basically the starting point for every design, especially for the architect, is not if everything is moved away and they can start from scratch, but basically with the existing structure. So besides that certification, we offer publications, and this is all freely available on our website, and I really like to invite you all. And I think this is a key part. We need to learn. We have to learn from each other's mistakes, and we have to be very pragmatic. Building construction is pragmatic. We need people who have experience. We have to share knowledge. And I always say it's not rocket science to build sustainable buildings. All the knowledge is out there, and we just have to accept it. We have to take it. We have to value it. So basically, as a summary, preserved building stock, I think, is one of the key mind shifts even if we talk about circular economy. Like I said, it's not the invitation to do everything new at the same time because we feel like, yeah, there will be a reuse. Building, it's a lot of material, it's big masses we have to move around. So there are always CO2 emissions involved in transport, in recycling processes. So the less we do it, the better quality we build today, the better it is. And we have to understand the building stock. We have to close basically the cycle in dismantling. Reuse and use of recycled material is a big part as well. And we really have to implement circularity on a wide scale, basically in all our heads. I think this is what it starts. It always starts with people, it ends with people. So we have to make that change, and we have to understand not just always new is great, but there's a value. I mean, look at historic buildings, what kind of culture a building can generate for a city, what kind of identity we basically build there. And I think this is the mind shift we have to start. So thank you very much, and looking forward to the discussion and to the next presentations. Thank you.
Great content, Christine, and based on practical experiences, that's very valuable. And from Germany, we now go to another powerhouse in Europe, to Italy. We go to Laura Cutaia. She's researcher at ENEA, and I always have to look that up. That's the Italian National Agency for New Technologies, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development. And now, Laura has many roles and responsibilities more, is truly knowledgeable, and also ENEA is extremely active, not only in Italy, but also in the European Circular Economy Stakeholders Platform. Laura will speak about buildings and infrastructure value chains, collaboration and market perspective for circular economy. I know she can speak for an hour easily on these topics, but she has minutes. Laura, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Hello, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. I'm going to speak about our experience and our role in this 2-year experience in HESP with regard to this particular topic on construction infrastructure. I don't know if the PowerPoint is visible or not.
Yeah, the presentation will be there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So next, please. Okay, just a few words on ENEA. ENEA is a public body in Italy, the second one as large for magnitude, and we are working on this topic from several years. Here we have just few projects mentioned. In particular, I would like to mention the Arcadia project, which is dedicated to the Italian database for LCA, and in this regard, we are working on a specific dataset for construction infrastructure. As well, we are working on CONDREF project, which is an Interreg project on the regulation and policies around Europe for enhancing and boosting the use of construction demolition waste for new application, and so on. Just going to the next slide, please. Yes, few words. ENEA is collaborating with HESP since many years, And this year, in 2020, we worked in particular also in this topic, construction infrastructure. So we had the opportunity to work on it and to discuss with European stakeholders on this very relevant topic in a workshop in 2020 and now in the workshop of 2021. At the same time, we have promoted the Italian circular economy stakeholder platform, more or less as a mirror platform for the European one. And also in this Italian platform, we have a dedicated group on this topic. This is really relevant not only in Europe, but also in Italy for the large amount of materials consumed and produced as waste, but also for the very important amount of small and medium enterprise involved in this sector, but also for the very large amount of money that these sectors can move. The next slide, please. In 2021, we have promoted a circular talk on a joint circular talk on a topic, two topics related to each other. The first one was focused on value chain collaboration. Our intention was to understand or to try to work to understand how the construction infrastructure value chain is related or maybe can be related with other value chains in a way that material flows can be interrelated. The second circular talk was focused on the market potential and also on the market constraints for, in particular, secondary materials from construction infrastructure value chains, but also from secondary materials that can be useful for the construction infrastructure value chain coming from other value chains. In this, in our circular talks, we had the opportunity to have a very relevant European stakeholders in this regard, such as Eurofers, Semburo, Saint-Gobain, Nadeco, Federbecon, Material Nomaden, la DG Grow of European Commission, the Fédération Internationale de Recyclage, European Building Confederation, ICLEI, Alchemia Nova, Dries and Somers, and Confederation of Danish Industries. We had from all these stakeholders many input in this regard and some consideration as a whole for trying to underline some really important topic, some really important issues that are related to this, to the potential of making these value chains more circular. The next slide, please. We have here summarized some main findings coming from the circular talks. The first consideration is that the industry looks prepared and is also willing to be collaborative for the circular economy. But there are still some problems, some barriers in the implementation of the circular economy in these value chains. There are also
2 minutes, Laura.
Yes, there are also some really specific focus from different associations, steel, cement, concrete, gypsum, demolition value chains that are really willingness to to move, they are prepared, but they need some to overcome some problems to boost the circular economy. Really quickly, yes, just few words. So there is needs of stronger collaboration between different actors. The next one, there are significant difference between member states in the application of regulation for the circular economy. This is a problem because the market is single. There is a need of monitoring for the circular economy in this context, and maybe levels can be an opportunity for this. There can be a need for monitoring also the relation between other policies, such as, for example, renovation wave and construction, demolition, and value chains, because there can be some feedback effect that are influencing not positively the production of construction demolition waste, for instance. And finally, the next one, there are some barriers focused during the construction, focused during the circular talks, such as the problem of pricing of recycled materials, secondary materials versus primary ones, the acceptance of recycled materials, the traceability, but also the qualification of secondary materials versus the primary ones. There are also some levels that we can use, policy and fiscal policies, the GPP, or in general the circular procurement, green procurement. There is a need of certification standards for declaring and for standardizing the production of secondary materials. And moreover, the needs of data, the digitalization and data availability for monitoring and also designing this process. The next one, please.
Please round off, Laura.
Yes, finally, this is a sort of final consideration about the possibility coming from these very important sectors. We need to have the stronger collaboration between stakeholders, between value chains, and also a sort of monitoring of policies, and also monitoring of the relation between policies and this sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laura. Big hand, Laura, please. No, thank you. I really liked for the discussion as well, the slide on the barriers, the recommendations, and of course the need for collaboration. Later on we have a panel again. Is there one question, Laura, which you would like to give to the speakers? Very short question, which the panelists can answer later on.
Yes, my question is about the role of monitoring, the need of monitoring, and also the role of research, because I'm coming from a research center. Our opinion is also...
That's okay, the role of monitoring and the role of research, we can do with that. Thank you very much, Laura. So I think we have, it's time to go to a panel, and we really have a power panel reflecting European reality, the business reality, the local reality in the region, the knowledge reality. So you can see on the slide who they are. A great start with a contribution from Ingrid Thijssen. As I said, she's the president of the Confederation of the Netherlands Industry and Employers, so very influential institute. And when I look at Ingrid, I don't see a building and infrastructure expert, of course, so she should not be answering detailed questions about levels, but I see the voice of the business community for the interest of circular economy in general, and also the importance of the building sector as a whole. So Ingrid, can I ask you for a contribution from that perspective? Business working with government? The floor is yours, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, honored to be here today, like I mentioned before in this webinar. Still morning in the Netherlands and already afternoon over there in Dubai. So let me congratulate you with a wonderful program so far of these Circular Europe Days. Well, I'm already introduced, and of course, half an hour ago, the impressive brochure was presented by RWS, TNO, and Holland Circular Hotspot. It's about circular infrastructure, as is the topic of this morning, or in Dubai this afternoon. Well, thank you very much for this valuable and very relevant initiative. And it contains an ambitious action agenda, and I really applaud this. And why is that? Well, because we have to stop global warming and the depletion of Earth's resources. So I'm therefore happy that our government, together with the business community at Knowledge Institute, has clearly set our goals for the Netherlands, halving the use of raw materials by 2030 and no more waste by 2050. And in order to reach these goals in the Netherlands, we have formulated so-called transition agendas in the fields of construction, manufacturing, food, plastics, and consumer goods. And well, since the construction sector in the Netherlands accounts for an estimated 50% of raw material consumption, 40% of the total energy consumption, and 30% of the total water consumption, making the construction industry circular is one of the main challenges that we face. And to reach a circular construction sector, it is essential to look at the following aspects. Use less raw material and more reusable, reused, and bio-based materials, and more flexible ways of building so that deconstruction is easier, as well as transformation of their function. The transition agenda contains a roadmap on how to make this circular construction sector a reality. Important elements in this transition agenda are: first, we have to make transparent what the material content of a building is. If we know that, we are also able to reuse these materials efficiently when, for instance, the construction takes place. And in order to achieve this, we are developing in the Netherlands a digital building passport. We, secondly, have also to look at the whole value chain of buildings, from concrete to deconstruction. And in order to do this, we want to work together internationally. Raw material supply chains exceed borders. National and international partners are needed for the transition. Third, our triple helix cooperation between government, businesses, and knowledge institutes is our USP. And it's also of key importance since in the Netherlands, the government is the client for a large part of the construction projects. And last but not least, we have to make the environmental footprint of a building an essential value in the decision which building company to award a building assignment. These focus points ask for innovation, investments, and entrepreneurship in the construction industry and bold policy initiatives. But watching the progress in providing circular solutions makes me proud. It makes me really proud of Dutch companies and their ambitions. The most important thing is that we globally, and starting on the EU level, we globally work together, that we have the same perspective, that we look at the challenges and together find the most efficient and impactful solutions. And I'm sure that these Circular Europe Days will contribute greatly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. We quickly move on time-wise to our panel here in the studio. I'll start with Giancarlo. Can we have a perspective from your side on, let's say, buildings and infrastructure in the context of the UAE?
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, I appreciate a lot of what you were saying in your talk, because the question too is, when you internationalize circularity beyond Europe, which has been really kind of pushing this effort, you run into the issue of much less experienced contractors and workforce and all this. And so the question becomes, how do you really get these aspects, and time really is the big issue. And so there's two things. One I mentioned earlier, aspirational. So UAE is very aspirational in what it wants to do, and the nice thing, all of us have our own barriers to success all over the world. Here, we actually don't have that much regulation barriers. So that can be resolved pretty easily if you have the right arguments, just for certain reasons that are special here. And so that is a value. So we can really push the limit and push the envelope very quickly with the right arguments. So that's one. But the barriers are the lack of expertise in all these construction fields, development fields, obviously deconstruction, and there's a lot of history there with a lot of issues that need to be resolved. But the question I brought up earlier is regional. And I don't feel like, because I've worked on a number of circularity projects in Europe, all over the world, including in the Middle East. And the issue is we tend to look at the circular economy circles at the building scale and how wide, or I'm trying to use appropriate terms, wide or thin is a circle. But you really should, I think, expand it to the regional scale, because that's how you capture the infrastructure issue. So for a population of 100,000, how big is your circle? Because at an individual building, you're not really capturing the full efficiencies.
So it's more than buildings, it's more than materials, it's more than buildings, it's the region. Yeah, you have to determine the right skill.
Yeah, and what are the key issues? Each context has its issues, like we said here, or sorry, like I said here. There's certain issues. Obviously, water is the main issue here. In Canada, if you have hydropower, you don't really need solar panels on your building, and you don't need all those resources to put up the solar panels. So really understanding where are the key regional issues, and even at the building scale, how does your project contribute to the key regional issues and not oversolve a problem that isn't as urgent?
And in terms of circularity for the region, to understand it better, is it energy efficiency, is it heating, is cooling, is the material aspect something you take into account? Are there new service models? Yeah. Can you give us just inform the audience on what's hot now?
So a popular topic that's all over the world is that nexus of energy, water, and food, right? And that's no different from here. Energy we have a lot of in every aspect. However, the water and the food is the big issue, but they always tie together. And so I think how you deal with that at the regional level. So for example, the UAE actually stores a lot of its water in the summer as in the aquifers as a regional storage bank, because there's so much cooling that's needed from the air conditioning systems, and then that's released in the winter when we're not producing as much energy from the power plants. So there is that regional smart thinking, and then how does that tie to the other questions? Because food access is very small here. Desalination is a big issue here, which is also very power intensive. So it's really how you tie these different systems together regionally.
Thanks, very much appreciated. We go to Josefina in Belgium. Of course, we have heard you speak earlier, and you've said a lot, but I'm curious, what are your reflections after hearing all this input from all the others? What have you heard? What have you not heard? What are we still missing? What should be discussed, etc.? Please share your wisdom.
Thank you. Yeah, no, there are many things which I've heard about today which are very much linked to what we are doing. So that's very reassuring in a sense that it tells us that we are focusing on some of the important things for sure. I wanted to link a little bit what I've heard about how to measure, how to assess the circularity. That came out in the report as well, and Professor Gruis came back to that as well. The European Commission is kicking off a study on how to measure circularity more specifically on the company level. I already mentioned 2 levels, and that looks at the building project level, and it has indicators for circularity and material use as well. But we want to dig even deeper into the indicators that a company can be working on, and also of course link that to then what can be used at the member state level or even EU level. So we will be looking at the role and the ability of actors to report on data and the barriers and drivers to doing that, and sort of eventually with the aim of concluding on some indicators for companies. We are also doing another study or a big project, which is on developing a roadmap for the reduction of whole life carbon of the building sector, which will very much be linked to circularity. And both those work streams are, I think, tie in very well with what basically all the speakers have been talking about today, stressing the importance of it. So I can just urge the different speakers and panelists, whether it's the Netherlands or Germany or Italy, to be very much involved in our studies, because we will really need your knowledge and your experience in these areas. I wanted to, if possible, is it possible to react to the questions that were asked, or is that coming later?
Yes, please. No, do that. Please incorporate
okay,
it.
good.
Yeah.
So the first question that I heard was regarding international cooperation, right? Of course, there are in so many areas that we need to cooperate regarding design and construction solutions, etc. But what I would like to focus on specifically here is coming back to how we measure and assess and report on circularity, because even if buildings are not really crossing borders, a lot of the different building professionals that are active, or whether it's in design or of course manufacturers of construction products, they work across borders very often. So I think it's really important, no matter how fantastic the Dutch ideas are and what is being done in Germany and Italy and elsewhere, I think it's very important that we, as much as possible, try to come together and get some agreement on this. It doesn't mean, of course, just as we heard the last speaker saying, that the priorities might be different in different countries or regions, but at least that we have a common ground in how we assess and report and what is the information that we need to do so. And I come back, I'm repeating myself a bit, but we can't just rely on the innovative companies. We need to be able to provide something which is really functional for the bigger part of the sector. And I think that perhaps is a bigger challenge than new innovations for taking circularity at least it is the same kind of challenge than having innovation and research stepping up the technological solutions, let's say. We need to work with those things in parallel. So to Laura's question on the role of monitoring, I think perhaps I've already touched on that, but also on research. I think, as we heard Christine say, there are loads of existing solutions out there which we need to apply. And I think that is just as important as to develop new solutions. So maybe research should, at least in part, also go into how do we make sure that most of the sector can actually apply what is already there.
So I know that Christine, in her presentation, she mentioned that how do we get the lessons from bottom-up experiences and best practice? How can we bring that to the policy level? That we make sure that the policy level is also speeding up with these nitty-gritty practical experiences. Do you have a 1 minute reaction on that? So bring the experiences from the floor to Brussels, for instance, or to The Hague.
Yeah, I think, it can be, one can feel a bit lonely sitting by one's kitchen table now for 2 years, right? But, and we don't have the same possibility as before to meet up and really discuss hands-on. But the Commission is indeed having several different kinds of fora where we try to get building professionals and member state representatives together and discuss. They can learn between themselves, but we can learn as well. So of course we have the circular economy stakeholder platform, but we also have, some of you may be involved in what is now called high-level construction forum, and there are other fora as well, because we are very keen on understanding what is going on the ground. And I, for one, I am in touch a lot with different member states, because there are several member states, not just the Netherlands, who are certainly moving faster than the Commission and the EU is doing.
Good.
So we are trying to learn as much as possible.
Thank you a lot. Very useful, Josefina. Many thanks. I'm going to turn back to the panel again, and I'm going to panel. Basically, you see this as the closing statements of the three panelists. So they can make a statement, they can set their main message again, and I give them an option. Either they strengthen what they've heard from themselves or the other persons, or they say, this is still missing, don't forget this item, or they can say a wish, what's important from their perspective. So what should other stakeholders do to help them? Or they can answer a question from one of the speakers. I start with you again, Ingrid. So you have a choice to make a statement in 1.5 minutes, please.
Yes, well, thank you very much. I think it's all about cooperation between governments and businesses. Well, companies are, of course, the ones that have to innovate, invest, and take the risks, but they cannot reach the circularity goals alone. They need to cooperate with governments, with knowledge institutes, and also across borders. And together with the working together with government is very important because, for example, of course, government is responsible for regulation. So government can design rules that introduce positive incentives to reach circularity. And for example, in our country we work with a so-called environmental impact tax. That's a tax on buildings based on their weight on the environment. And especially in the Netherlands, where the government accounts has declined for more than 90% of the construction projects, they have a very important role.
90.
90%, yes, that's correct. So the public and private sector need to work together in order to guarantee sustainable and circular building projects. So the government is responsible for regulation. The government is the main client, so it has the ability to set the rules. And last but not least, let me say that the Netherlands has always been very successful in its triple helix cooperation between government, businesses, and knowledge institutes. And this cooperation, I'm sure, will also facilitate reaching our future circularity goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. We turn to Giancarlo. 1.5 minutes to stress your main message.
Sure. You never give me enough time. No, I think the main message that keeps coming across is addressing all the issues at the appropriate scale. And again, I mean, I'll just repeat very quickly the focus on the regional scale and the district scale. So maybe looking at a population size and the circularity. And the reason for that, and this will be the point I'd like to just get across, is rebound effect. Whenever we try to solve any problem in the world, technically, we actually end up consuming more. LED lights, we now have more light pollution all over the world, even though we have more efficient lighting. And we can actually, there's been studies in the US that we can reduce the electricity grid and full energy consumption of the US economy by 60% by electrifying the whole system. However, again, history shows us humans will just consume more, find other ways to use that. So I would ask two things. One is, there's also skepticism about circularity in terms of its affordability. And so to uptake this, to not just treat this as a technical solution and we're doing this because it's the right thing to do, but to actually take the human factor into consideration and talk about affordability and livability, about how circularity can actually make our communities more affordable and more livable. So it's a full holistic solution that is adding a lot of value so that you don't, when you go outside of Europe and go to poorer countries, especially Africa, where most of the expansion is going to come for this next century, and they say, yeah, that's nice for you, we can't afford that. And so you need to talk about the other benefits, and when you tie them all together, at least in my experience, you actually get higher producing solutions and more effective solutions.
Great. Affordability and livability we have to take into account as well. Great. We'll go back to Josefina. One statement. What is your final takeaway? You've been speaking a lot. I give you the opportunity for one statement. You have an audience now, and it's an important audience, but huge networks behind them. What's your message from the Commission side?
Yeah, I would like to say, start setting targets. Whether you are in policy making, or if you can have an impact on public procurement, this has already been mentioned. I think start setting targets when it comes to public procurement. If you're a manufacturer of construction products, set targets as to how you can start doing the EPDs, so the environmental performance declarations. If you work in a design team, start to set targets as to how you would work with circularity. Find your own targets and get going. That would be my
fantastic.
My
I think we can definitely work with that. Now, we have 3 speakers, Professor Gruis, Christine, and Laura. I'm very curious what they take away from all of this. This is also your moment to make your last statement and reflect. Let me start with Christine, and then I go to Professor Gruis.
Yeah, I think I would like to build on what Giancarlo just said. I think we need to have more honesty in the conversation, because it's, we have to learn from each other, and a key part of learning is making mistakes. And to be honest, I mean, what we do in Europe around circularity is basically we try to fix mistakes we've made. Looking at Europe, at Germany, over-insulating buildings with the wrong material. Now you realize, ooh, this might be toxic waste. This is not like a new scientific discovery. We could have known that from the start. So that would be my message to everyone in other regions of the world. Really, as well, look behind the story, try to understand the context, and then understand what can you do differently maybe from the start to avoid making the same mistakes. So I think this kind of honesty to me is a key part what we need to change as well. When we talk about collaboration, it's not about selling each other how good things are. It has to be to share experiences and to be honest and to really work together on creating solutions, because I think circularity, just one word to that, it's the right thing to do. I don't think we have to theorize it. It is the right thing to do. It is just wrong to waste material. It's wrong to generate toxic waste. It is just wrong to build buildings and after 20, 30 years we're just demolishing them because they're not modern anymore or because the quality was not good. So I think we have to find back to understanding that there has to be quality. I think is the key part of everything we do. We have to do quality, sometimes less is more, and like I said in the beginning, to be honest and to not just replicate each other's mistakes globally, because a lot of challenges we're facing is this one-fits-all approach in countries and climates where it doesn't make sense. So we have to, I think, come back to a different kind of conversation.
Sounds so logical said like that. And what we sometimes say in circular economy in general, it's 20% about technological innovation, it's 80% about social innovation. I think that's an important one as well. Professor Gruijs, your 1.5 minute of glory. Now, what are the points you really want to make? What can we learn? Please.
So many good things have already been said. I would like to stress again that I totally agree that it needs to be approached holistically. So looking at the whole carbon life approach, looking at beyond the project level. So also look at companies, because in the end, companies are the only one who can turn pilot projects into full programs together. The regional level, I totally agree with Giancarlo. We know, for example, if we want to start practicing with building with reclaimed materials, that in your own locality, sometimes you cannot find the materials to actually go and practice. So literally, we need to look at more regional and also cross-border cooperation in terms of exchange of materials to enable reclamation. So I also totally agree with what Christine said, that we do not have to only think about it, but really start from where we are today. It needs a lot of also talks about how we regulate things, not only within our own countries, but also within Europe. So also in that sense, a lot of international cooperation and exchange is necessary. But I think still, most importantly, mainly I think it is clear to the people in the panel here, but towards other people and institutes and policymakers, I think it's still necessary to stress that circular economy, be it in construction or in another industry, is not something that's an extra thing, something that we also need to achieve besides all the other things. But it's really just an integral part of, for example, reaching the Paris agreements and creating a sustainable economy. It's not something next to it. It's part of it, and that's how we should treat it. And that's why we just need to work on it nationally and internationally. And again, we're very happy to keep exchanging from the Dutch experiences with our international partners.
And you made your point this session that infrastructure should be an integral part of the discussion. So we talk a lot about buildings, but infrastructure should not be missed. Great. Last but not least is Laura. We move to Laura. What is your main message that you want to share with this international group of people here in Dubai?
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. Just few keywords because time is running. Fine. First one, design. Design for the construction, but also the design needs and supply of materials, raw materials and secondary materials. Substitution. We need, with the circular economy, try to substitute primary materials with secondary one in a very relevant matter. Sorry?
What is your main message that you want to share with this international group of people here at 9 to 5?
Yes, I'm sharing.
Please continue, Laura.
Yeah, the third one is collaboration. It's collaboration between stakeholders along the value chain and between value chains. Then one, the link between policies and their effect. Again, the relation between, for example, renovation wave and the effect on the construction infrastructure value chain. And then the link between innovation and research in the everyday life of the construction infrastructure sector. I mean the connection between every level of the application, from industries, from enterprises, small and medium enterprises, professional and so on, because we need to use the innovation, to use the research, and to move the level and the quality of material and solution in for coming from the circular economy approach at every level. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. Grazie mille, Laura. So we come to the end, actually, of this session. I heard very, very, very sensible things today from great speakers and panels. Buildings infrastructure is essential. It is a sector with a climate and a resource impact. We have solutions already that can change the situation today. We have collaborative experiences that are working today, which should be extended on. The timing momentum after the pandemic is very important. This is a sector we really have to work on. It's a sector with, I think, the recovery funding at this moment, with climate financing. We have stressed the let me call it the undervalued importance of infrastructure for the climate targets at this moment. We've spoken about the markets and the interlink between various parts of the value chain and the market for secondary resources. We have been speaking about the importance of design for deconstruction, also for the renovation wave, for instance, and collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. Business can't do it alone, the government can't do it alone, we need each other here. We say this in Dubai as a platform for the world, in a region that also needs to change, wants to change, and is changing. I want to thank everybody, all the speakers from all their perspectives. I applaud again the beautiful initiative of the infrastructure brochure. Yes, let's applaud indeed. Professor Gruijs, Transition Team, Rijkswaterstaat, TNO, Holland Circular Hotspot, great initiative. And as you know, an ESET brochure will follow on March 1 and 2. Stay tuned. Many thanks to the leadership group, the hidden power behind this whole organization of that event. We'll be back in March as well. For those who are here in Dubai, for those who have a reserved lunch, lunch is ready for you. Do not forget, talking about buildings, building with wood is on the program in the Slovenian pavilion in the early afternoon. Thank you very much. See you soon. Stay tuned. Great. Thanks.